you would exactly look to see how much of uncertainty is there at this 100 microliter level. Or suppose you're looking at a thermometer that you're using to measure a fridge temperature, which is to be between 2 to 8 degrees or minus 20 or minus 80, whatever it is. But please make sure that when it's getting calibrated, these operational temperatures are calibrated. And what is the uncertainty there? That the thermometer may be able to measure up to 100 degrees or 60 or 70 or whatever, but it's not relevant for you. Your fridge thermometer has to measure and be very sure of the uncertainty between 2 to 8 degrees. Similarly, for a water bath, your 37 degrees centigrade is important. So that is how you decide what your operational requirements are and what is uncertainty there. Calibration of equipment can be outsourced. That's another thing that I would like to bring to your attention, to an external accredited calibration laboratory, or this can be done in-house also. Mostly, generally in India as of now, it is getting outsourced, but it can be done in-house also. We have already talked about the outsourcing of calibration to calibration laboratories. We are mostly talking about minor equipment, ancillary equipment like pipettes, centrifuges, etc.
Calibration of equipment is required for both analytical equipment as well as ancillary equipment. The ancillary equipment like pipettes, centrifuges, etc. can be calibrated in-house or can be outsourced to a third party or a second party agency. We will talk about in-house calibrations in the next slide, but before moving on to that, we need to understand something about the concept of verification of calibration. This is what happens in most analytical equipment like your biochemistry analyzers, etc. A lot of your components like the lamp, cuvette, etc. are checked through the mechanism of just checking it. And because at this point, there are certain calibrations which cannot strictly be made in the SI units. In these cases, the laboratory is required to use some alternative mechanism to establish the traceability to an appropriate measurement standard. And the one material which is very commonly used is the quality control material. Such a process is called calibration verification. So most of the analytical equipment are generally calibrated by the manufacturers where they come from. They will do the preventive maintenance. After that, they verify it using a quality control material, some kind of a certified reference material. You can read more about this in NABL 142, which is a policy on traceability of measurement results. So now, we can move on to in-house calibration.
But for minor equipment, some of the equipment calibration can be done in-house also. If calibrations are done in-house, again the traceability has to be demonstrated. And some examples of in-house calibration can be a tachometer, which is calibrated, can be used for calibrating the rotational speed of centrifuges. But make sure that the tachometer has a traceable calibration itself. The tachometer must be calibrated by a higher degree of laboratory with a higher degree of accuracy, which is a 17025 accredited laboratory, and should have calibrated that tachometer with which you will further calibrate your centrifuges. And that tachometer can be used to calibrate your whatever centrifuge in your laboratory. So that unbroken chain of comparisons to the higher level is always evident at any kind of audits. I hope that concept is clear. So once again, to reiterate about calibration of equipment, both minor equipment or ancillary equipment and major equipment. Minor equipment can be outsourced to a third party or any government accredited signed agency who can come in and calibrate your equipment. And talking about minor equipment can be done in-house also. And when you're talking about your major analytical equipment, generally the manufacturers themselves do the calibration as required. And more importantly, here it's a calibration verification, which is very important, because after you calibrate, you run a quality control to make sure that your calibration is correct. And if you go back to other examples which can be done in house apart from your centrifuges, you can also calibrate digital thermometers, which are used to calibrate other thermometers in your laboratory. Calibrate one digital thermometer, then you can calibrate other thermometers using the one which you have calibrated, but the degree of uncertainty should always be clearly specified. Calibrated weights can be used to calibrate pipettes. Calibrated timers can be used to calibrate other timers of centrifuges. These are all possibilities that you can make use of as you think of calibration of ancillary equipment in your laboratory. Now that we have understood some basic concepts in calibration like traceability, uncertainty, frequency of calibration, how we can have calibration of minor equipment and ancillary equipment and major analytical equipment, who will do the calibration and how frequently, we have to come back to the documentation again. Documentation of calibration is very, very important. We already talked about the information sheet for calibrations. We talked about certificates and what the certificate should contain. That one more document that you would want to keep in for your reference will be, and a very useful document, it is a calibration matrix. I'm giving a picture of a sample calibration matrix here. It's a very handy document if you developed a calibration document for both major, which is analytical, and minor, which is ancillary equipment, for a quick reference. This will become a ready reckoner. This will alert the lab to schedules of calibration and major maintenance. An easy way is to stick dates on the chart like you are seeing on this one. You can use yellow sticky notes or something like that for your schedule calibrations. When was it done and when it is due. Similarly, you can use another color for the major maintenance which is scheduled. So that's a very easy way of just an idea. It's not like it's a mandatory thing. It's just an idea. And this should be displayed in a prominent place to alert the relevant functionaries of upcoming need for calibration or maintenance. In the case of minor equipment, only calibrations need to be displayed because that is how it generally happens. Any maintenance required should be addressed through manufacturers before calibration is considered. I hope this point is clear, because for major equipment, we are assuming here, I am assuming here that the manufacturer is going to do both the schedule maintenance and the calibration. So if you display both the dates on one matrix, it's easy to manage that way. Whereas in the case of minor equipment, generally the third-party agencies will not do your repairs, they'll only do your calibration. So if you have a calibration schedule for all your centrifuges and your micropipettes and whichever equipment you have, and display it as it's again a matrix, it will alert you to the upcoming requirement for calibrations. So at this point, what is about the maintenance that we are talking about? There will be minor repairs required for all your minor equipment also. When a major equipment manufacturer comes for their scheduled maintenance and calibration, whatever is due, they will first do a maintenance, and they will analyze the equipment for their accuracy, precision, etc., and then they do the adjustment and then calibrate. But in the case of minor equipment, generally the maintenance is not done by the third party agency. We already talked about it. They only calibrate. So if there is any maintenance required, suppose a spring of a pipette is not working properly, you would want to fix it before you send out for calibration, because there's no point calibrating a defective equipment. So first repair it if it's repairable, and then do your calibration. And coming back to the duration of calibration, again, you can do the periodicity as we had talked about in earlier slides. Guidelines from accreditation bodies, we said that also earlier, have to be kept in mind while periodicities of calibration are concerned. The dates shown in this particular example are only dummy examples and not really how it is. You need to refer to the documents from accreditation bodies to decide upon the periodicity of calibration. So again, if you look at this, you see the green ones are for the scheduled maintenance or for major maintenance, and the yellow for the calibrations done and calibrations due. And such a matrix is a very handy mechanism of alerting and understanding the calibrations. And one more set of documents that are required. So we talked about different kinds of documentation, the product insert or the data sheets from calibrators for the calibration certificates, the calibration matrix, and one more set of documents that come out of calibrations that is very important, especially in the case of analytical equipment, is your raw data. If you remember, if calibrations are done, generally it's a precision check before and after your calibration. Before calibration, so that to make sure to understand there are errors, random errors are corrected, so therefore the precision check is done. And after calibration, for verification of your calibration and running of your calibrator, all these things should be retained. There will be a lot of raw data generated during your calibration of your analytical equipment. There will be background checks, there will be carryover checks. So all these required relevant data should be filed and evidenced during any kind of audit. So this is the documentation part of calibration that you need to retain. Pre-calibration verifications, calibration process, post-calibration verifications, the evidence of traceability and uncertainty, the actual calibration certificates, and also a matrix to alert you about the need for upcoming calibrations. I just want to reiterate the documentation requirements. Pre-calibration verifications, and generally these are repeatability tests or QCs, CVs which will be taken, background checks, carryover checks. Those will be done by your manufacturer. In the case of analytical equipment, right now I'm only talking about analytical equipment. So this is your pre-calibration verifications, and during the calibration, how your calibrator was run, all those things will be available. Post-calibration verifications using QCs, the evidence for traceability and certainty, actual calibration certificates, and also a matrix to alert you about the need for upcoming calibrations. So that's about calibrations, and I hope you have understood the concept of calibrations and concept of uncertainty, concept of traceability, periodicity, documentation. And these are all vital concepts and should be kept in mind as you embark upon calibration of your equipment. And the next part of this maintenance and use of equipment in your maintenance qualifications. And this is also a very important aspect, and we will discuss this in the next video.